This woman, this woman you have come into contact with in the manner you have, she's not a young woman. And she looks around my age, maybe a few years younger, a few years older. But she's not a young woman, which means she's not most likely somebody that was recently cultivated as part of their new generation. And she's somebody that found a way to live for the last 20, 25 years. How was she able to have that kind of mobility and that kind of acknowledgement within her own community for all this time? Perhaps she was wise. Perhaps there was something about her that others admired. Or, at least, she was sophisticated enough to avoid getting killed. I am making a personal appeal to those who have the possession of the bodies of the woman who, as of yet, has not been named in Afghanistan that was abducted last night, as well as whoever are the abductors of Seham Serjawa. I don't want them to be dead. The truth is, I may not agree with them politically. I might be their opposition. But this is a very personal and symbolic power struggle. It might be in your interest to reconsider your tactics in order to perhaps understand you have greater possibilities than thus far you have been offered. These sorts of intimations have been ongoing for a very long time, and what could be identified as a strategic gain, including one that can be maintained, well, there are extenuating circumstances, so I'm going to be blunt. It has come to my attention that today would be approximately 6 months after the 25th anniversary of my son's murder. That would mean that somebody would be very, very highly desirous of that, perhaps, as part of what they would consider to be their investment moving forward. Now, I have refused to see what happens to my son as being an exercise of a woman's right to choose, as if it were a civil right. And I've refused to see it as if it were some sort of sacrifice. In other words, a mother sacrificing her only begotten son as part of a higher calling. It's murder. And it was murder that was in part, at least, if not significantly, at my hand. And I've served my time. Whatever the justification was for this murder, I committed it. I know it. I've known it since it happened. I wept profusely. But I said to myself, I would rather kill my son now than have to live with what I fear they will try to subject him to in the time frame to come. My son would be around 25 years today. This would be around the time of his 25th birthday. This would be around the time he would be old enough to run for Congress. It would be 10 years short of him being considered an adult eligible for certain kinds of political representation that I anticipate his father and his father's family might have preferred he be associated with, and that at least while he was in his early formative years, I, as his mother, would have exposed him to that way of life. But that was not possible, because he was murdered. In some ways, I understand the reason he was murdered is because somebody determined that his father's interest and his father's political raison d'etre and his father's lineage had a certain kind of political capital that, at least at the time, mine did not. And so for the last 25 years, what has happened, I understand, is that in some manner, there have been aspersions cast on me as if somehow I seduced him, specifically and in order to become impregnated with his child, so as to in some manner rob or dispossess his bloodline. There was a specific political identification, a specific genetic identification, specific things they did, politically, socially, economically, that somebody determined was the kind of consideration that they wanted to be under their sway. And I was just a vessel. I was a vessel, and not only was I a vessel, but I was to be the one to bear the cost of the sin. For whatever reason, it has not suited them or struck them as being necessary to identify it as a sin. Was the sin of the act of the conception a sin? Some may say, some may not. At the time, I did not consider it a sin, and neither did the Father. But was the act of ending the life of that child before it was born a sin? The Father did not believe it was, but I did. And I did it anyway. Because I believed that under the circumstances, to have born that son would have been an even greater sin than whatever it meant for me to take that child's life by my own hand and have to bear the cost and suffer the consequences. There is no longer any lien on me and my blood from that arrangement or whatever the expectations of political expedience or utility came from some other mindset believing they had an entitlement. In the course of that, my mother has been murdered. My grandfather has been murdered. Other members of my family and I have been alienated from each other, perhaps permanently. I understand my sister, who was subjected to an even more horrendous event that nobody saw fit to intercede upon, had several children and now even has grandchildren. And because of the morass of amorality that pervades whatever is considered the legitimate political sphere within this country, they are allowed to be exploited in the most grotesque manners. They're racist, they're dehumanizing, they're sexist, they're anti-Semitic. Insofar as my sister or her children might consider themselves to have a lineage that is also Christian or Muslim, as I understand they do, it is also profaned. She and they have made a choice to have no contact with me. That was their decision. In the meantime, whatever exercise of a lien or performance of obligation was understood to be made available through me because of that first blood bond involving my son is done and over with. My son forgave me a long time ago. I've borne the sin myself. I chose to. Because it was necessary to be honest. Now we are where we are. My understanding is that these women of concern bear no such sin. So they have not had to answer for such a sin. If it has been determined there is something else that they may bear responsibility for, then I also understand they are the kind of women that stepped up to take responsibility. This is a very powerful thing. I would hope you would not waste it. And I would hope you would not abuse it. There might be more capacity for reason and potentially accomplishment if it were to be addressed as such. If they were not to merely be seen as chattel to attempt to acquire some privilege or priority over somebody else, they in and of themselves are very powerful. It's a power I do not want to be without. I've paid for it. I have paid for that kind of power in my life. It is lonely to know that I don't have it right now. I don't have it among me right now. But I also knew for a period in time there was something I had to do in order to be worthy of it myself. I would request that you understand this. It is necessary for us to see how much we love each other, even in our barbarity. Nobody has any claim to my blood anymore. And I have no children of my own at this time. But I am still capable of many great things. I may perhaps even be capable of being a mother among others, a mother of a nation, a strong, powerful, proud nation, composed of people that are not shamed, are not ashamed, and that will not relent to somebody else's projection. It's not a stereotype. Some of us fight these battles. Some of us willingly fight them because it's that important. As I said, it is not so much important to me whether or not these women and I would be politically allied. Whatever tactics they would choose in exercise of their power may not be ones I would agree with, but it's power nonetheless. And it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to make the most of whatever power it is you already have and that you seek to consolidate. If you are not acknowledged, which you are right now, and if you do not also perhaps see yourself in someone else who might otherwise be very different, but then again, maybe not.